Hi everyone, my name is Katie Morgan, and today I'll share the work that I'm doing to understand the role of civics ed in the context of US public schooling. So, the dominant public-facing narrative of civics education is that it prepares youth to be adults who participate fully in civic life. However, civics education has been used as this tool for social control and reproduction of the status quo since its inception. Each era has brought new political power with new agendas that have outlined how civics education should function. So I hope that my research traces the history of civics ed over time across movements, across political eras, shifts in power and ideology, in order to reveal the ways that civics has and continues to be constructed as a method for the maintenance of the status quo. And I do this in part to consider how a humanizing civics curriculum could accomplish a very different aim than traditional civics. So when we're thinking about civics ed, we're thinking about the philosophical, military, and economic reasons that have caused citizenship to often be conceptualized as this loyalty to or membership in a particular nation state. And so therefore, civics ed is generally involved in promoting the knowledge, skills, and dispositions necessary for future citizens to pledge their allegiance and demonstrate loyalty to the state. And so, because those who have power get to shape the content, pedagogy, they get to frame the educational dialogues. Because of all this, schools often reproduce the existing power structures in society. This is something that we've covered in this class extensively. And particularly civics ed is able to define what type of citizen to educate for and ultimately shape the future political arena in that way. And so those in power will most likely favor a type of civics ed that helps them maintain their dominance by privileging their knowledge and their ways of engaging in politics. And that brings us to the way that civics contributes to settler colonialist projects. So feeling an affinity for or loyalty to a nation state does not come naturally. And so therefore schools, as a mechanism of socialization, are needed to cultivate allegiance to the nation state. And so one important job of civics has been to provide children from different cultures with this common identity as members of a single nation state. And so those students in the mainstream, or those kind of like those that are operating in the mainstream, get to establish what a common national identity would look like. And then students who are out of the mainstream are asked to adopt an identity through civics education and through other schooling processes that might be in tension with their own identities and their group memberships or their allegiances. And so in that way, it's civics is perpetuating erasure and settler colonialist logics. Similarly, with capitalism, schools are central institutions of modern capitalist society. And so we know from this course that capitalist logics are important to schools in general, but civics education in particularly has been important in reinforcing these dominant ideologies that really praise the benefits of capitalism, engage students often uncritically with these dominant traditional American narratives of the benefits of free enterprise and the U.S. as a place of economic prosperity with no end. And often this is in tandem with failing to recognize the tendency of kind of unregulated capitalism to give rise to fascism. And so a ton of our dominant civic ideologies, from the idea of the American dream to the idea of pulling oneself up by your bootstraps to this idea that the US has a moral superiority over other countries, these are all deeply entwined with capitalism and introduced through civics. And so, and then these are all reproduced through our education policy. And so Tennessee's civics policy positions it as one of 36 states that require civics coursework as a prereq for graduation. As of 2018, it was one of 29 states requiring high school students to take a version of the U.S. citizenship test in order to graduate. And so they're engaging with this multiple choice assessment of kind of questions required by the Office of Citizenship and Immigration Services for naturalization, and passing that makes them eligible for a full high school diploma in Tennessee. And so this exam is not a valid assessment of civic identity development. It really only evaluates what we think of as civic knowledge, which ignores other really important civic competencies that are needed to prepare youth for participation in civic life, which we'll get into in a second. But the important thing is that there's no evidence that would link recalling facts like how many branches of government there are or how a bill becomes a law. There's no evidence that that promotes civic participation later in life. But that is what our policy has outlined is important in order for students to achieve graduation. So what can be done to create more humanizing civics curriculum? Schools are crucial sites for civic identity development. So civic knowledge, like what's tested on those naturalization assessments that students are taking, it does account for the fact that in order to be an active citizen, you need a critical baseline understanding of government and history. So in order to critique your government and speak truth to power, you need to understand what's happening. So schools are really easily able to implement and assess kind of civic knowledge, but teaching civic knowledge alone is dehumanizing because it doesn't give students the chance to develop a civic identity. And so for this, students would need civic knowledge reinforced by opportunities to practice civic skills and have civic experiences. So civic skills are these places where youth are prepared to communicate effectively, deliberate, reach consensus with people who have different viewpoints, problem solve with others for the common good. And then civic experiences are these kind of critical moments of formation of habits that would help students see themselves as capable of making a contribution that would benefit their communities. So these are kind of experiences that are action-oriented. They might include having a voice in collective decision-making, being involved in partnership with others to create something new and important for a community, volunteering, getting involved in the political process through community organizing, activism, or advocacy efforts. These are all spaces of increased civic identity development, and that component is what we kind of hypothesize or imagine would lead to more humanizing civics education. And so now in transitioning to think more deeply about that, or to provide an example, I'd like to point to an example of a civics education initiative that I think supported all of these components of civic identity development, so knowledge, skills, and experiences, in one kind of space to recenter youth's lived experiences and their funds of knowledge in their civics ed. And so I have this video of a freshman seminar course in a school that I've worked with here in Nashville who offered what was essentially a de facto course in civic identity development, or that promoted civic identity development. And so I thought I'd just show this to kind of close us out.
To find something that will help the community, save money, time, energy.
It had a pretty good impact on everyone who came out because I could see them actually interested, which made me even more excited to present the project.
We did affordable housing stories. We just wanted to see how people felt about affordable housing, and their stories were really fascinating. I just wanted to share it with people and just to get their point of view out on our website.
So I was a part of the
Chestnut Hill Sidewalks Committee. It was crazily impactful to the community. We actually have a 1-year plan that hopefully Chestnut Hill sidewalks will actually be restored to how the former glory was when they were first made. I'm actually making a change where I live, like where I go to school. And that makes everything to me. It makes me feel like I can do something. I actually have a voice.
I seen gentrification going around where I live around East Nashville. And then before that, I really didn't know much about gentrification. And then I would see the condos, be like, oh, I wish I could have one of those. But I didn't know that it was killing the culture of Nashville.
We're placing condos where there shouldn't be condos, and it's killing Nashville's culture of being a big small town.
Affordable housing has been a problem for years, and I think this showcase created a great awareness about it.
The awareness that we created through that one showcase itself went a long way, and I feel like if we were to do it again, we could get even better and bigger impact.
Our event was the rising generation against gentrification, and gentrification was basically what's been happening around Nashville. Although there's being new houses being built, there are people getting kicked out their houses because they can't afford these new houses, or they can't find houses that they can afford in Nashville.
Cool. So I'll leave us with that, and I'm looking forward to our discussion in class. Maybe we can touch on some of these topics around the development of civic knowledge, skills, and experiences in schools, and then the role of civics ed in a political era that seeks to suppress anti-racist curriculum and pedagogy. Here are my references, and thank you so much for engaging with me today. Looking forward to our talk.